Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Cybattler, a 1993 mecha arcade classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Jalico, Cybattler released to arcades in 1993. So this title was relatively obscure. It never received any console ports back in the day, but fast forward to 2021, and courtesy of Hamster, we have it available as an arcade archive release for the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today. So this one had come out about a month ago. There were a lot of other shoot-em-ups that I was interested in covering between now and then, so a little bit late getting to it, and I feel a little bit disappointed by that, as it's one that has been really interesting to kind of visit from time to time. And if it were back in 1993 and I saw this one in an arcade, I would love to play it, as there's a lot of interesting stuff here. I love mechs. Some of the presentation is super fascinating to me, like the stat sheet when the game starts up and you're seeing all the information about the mech that we're piloting, the Blanche. I love that stuff. That said, this game is a little bit of a tough sell as far as recommending it to others, for two reasons. So if you're going to be playing this game single player, it's going to be extremely difficult, and that has to do with the way the continue system is. It's a much better co-op game, in my opinion. The other part is it's relatively short at just 6 stages without a lot of replayability. That said, if those two things aren't an issue for you, then this is one that I've had a lot of fun with, and I just really enjoy kind of the atmosphere and presentation it has. But rather than just say that, let's dive into the game itself and show you. So once you put credits into the machine, it brings up the select here, and this is kind of important as it really helps drive home the idea that, at least in my mind, that the game is meant to be played two-player, as you have both side 1 and side 2 up here. And once one player starts, the other player has a couple seconds to chime in as well. Then we get this awesome little launch sequence with our armament being displayed, and this happens between every stage. So you start off with the beam launcher and a beam sword. And so that's automatically, that kind of sets it apart from other shoot 'em ups, because not only do we have a main weapon, the beam launcher, but we have the beam sword. And one really neat feature is we can actually aim in all 8 directions around us, the various, like the orthogonals as well as the diagonals. The beam launcher, which we only have in stage 1, is kind of interesting as well, as it depends on using a charge, which is displayed in the bottom of the screen. That charge builds up as we're not firing. It's also possible to get some power-ups dropped from our assistant ships that will build up that charge as well. But fortunately, the beginning of the stage is relatively straightforward enough that we can just use the beam saber to attack all the enemies. And in some ways, that's actually really satisfying, as there are unique animations for destroying the enemies when you do it with the saber versus when you shoot them with the beam launcher itself. But one thing that is neat about the beam launcher is you can hold down the fire button to lock in the direction you're facing. So say we want to be in this top left corner, we can totally do that. We can just like camp up here and take pot shots at the enemy like that. Not necessarily the greatest if they're shooting you at close range, but as far as getting hit is concerned, so the game itself uses an armor system. So we have an armor meter in the top left and right for the 2 different players, and throughout the course of the game, it is possible to occasionally get a repair, like this one here, that will repair our damage. So the armor meter itself has 8 total hit points of damage, though of course is typical for a lot of games where you can take multiple levels of damage. Those damage totals that enemies deal to you will be different. So at the bottom there, we saw a red mech. That one's kind of a interesting enemy, as he keeps on popping up time and time again through all the stages, up until stage 5, where we finally fight him as a boss. Just kind of like one of those annoying enemies you can't damage, and he's there more or less to taunt you. So we've made it our way through the first stage and to our boss, Sikanas here. And like just taking a quick second to note that this is a Cybattler. So the name isn't our mech. Our mech is the CYX0017 Blanche. The Cybattlers are the enemies we're fighting. Part of this mysterious alien military force that's invading Earth. That's ultimately headed up by this force called the Helgul. So, but that first boss down, we have a little bit of a section there where we see some of the enemies move away, and we get our mission complete screen. And here you can see there's not a whole lot of variance, or rather there's not really much to do that we can actually change the point value stage to stage. So as far as a score attack game, this is going to be a little lower that way compared to a lot of other shoot 'em ups of the area that we're starting to deal with multipliers and some fun ways to do score. But we do have this little loading section between each stage that changes up our armament. So now instead of having the beam launcher, we have the beam Gatling. And rather than have a charge meter build up, if we don't fire the beam Gatling, then it will build up to a powerful shot that we can unleash. But its rapid fire shot is pretty effective as well. So depending on whether you want to continue the rapid fire or if you want to charge it up, depends on the situation you find yourself in. Though in a lot of situations with just the small fry in the game, using the beam saber is really the way to go, as the enemies will generally go down pretty quick. Here we do have one of the other power-ups in the game. There's this little option that you can get that works like an option in just about any other shoot 'em up. It will just help add to our firepower, but it doesn't always spawn, and I'm not 100% sure what causes it to or not. Anyway, that aside, so I was mentioning that the game is more difficult as a single-player game than a two-player game. So we've just barely passed what would be the midpoint of this stage. And if you're playing at single-player, should you continue, that's where you're going to be continuing from. And this is important to note as we're coming up on the second stage boss, Griffon. And this boss, this guy sucks. It's the first major difficulty spike that the game has. So he has those claws that he's launching out at us, and should he grab us, he'll pull us in and smash our mech right in front of him. And so depending on the direction you're aiming, it's possible to get some shots in there. But as you can see, it actually is kind of hard to do a lot of damage, as those claws do kind of block our shots as well. He does come from both behind and in front, so that's one thing to note. Oh no! Game over. So there, I would have gotten a game over and would have had to continue from the main, or from the continue point of the stage itself. That is ultimately my problem that I have with the game and the game's difficulty. It's definitely unfair in that a lot of the bosses will be really problematic in the way that you have to fight them, and fighting them on a single life is going to be difficult as you have to move through half the stage. This one is relatively easy to get to the point where you fight Griffon, but other stages that's not the case. So that really dampens the enjoyment of the title. But playing it with two-player, as long as you're both not dead at the same time, you can continue at the point you die, and that really does help make the game easier and also more enjoyable. So here we were equipped with additional weapons, the beam shield and the missile pods. So the missile pods fire missiles every single time we use our main weapon, but not the beam saber. And the beam shield itself will absorb one shot, but then it takes a couple seconds to recharge. So it can help avoid a lot of damage throughout some of the more difficult sections of this game itself, but in situations where you've got enemies firing dual beams like this, it's not going to matter much anyway, because one beam takes out the shield, the other beam deals damage. Anyway, that is basically what Cybattler has to serve you. And as far as shoot 'em ups are concerned, although being short, I feel like this one is fun and it just does a lot that's interesting and unique. each stage kind of has a different gimmick or feel to it. So in this one, we're moving through this old battlefield, which is in great like wrecks in the background. You've also got these like mines, but they don't actually do any damage to us. And these ships that we kind of encounter for the first time that we can slice in a couple different ways. That's neat. As well, there's also one other feature that's particularly cool about this stage, the Mega Bazooka. So there's a lot of interesting ideas and concepts being presented here. Oh, here's that Mega Bazooka I was talking about. So like the other weapons, it has a charge meter where we get a big burst of fire if we let it charge up, but it's also great to just use it rapid fire, especially with rapid fire turned on, to just go to town on the enemy's spawns from the top of the screen. Those that come from behind, you're not going to be able to do much about. So the minus flavors of this game ultimately come in the first. There's only a couple that I really have. The first, of course, is the difficulty. Just being able to, or rather being unable to continue on the boss fights and having the boss fights be so brutal and forcing you to go through half the stage to get back to those boss fights is not something that's going to be awesome. If you're looking for a challenge, this one will definitely serve it up for you. But in a lot of ways, it just strikes me as being something that will lead to more frustration than enjoyment. And then this one's a little more minor complaint, but power-ups are relatively few and far between in this game. So in the first couple stages, we see the power-up ships fairly frequently, but by past that point, we don't. And there's really only a couple points where the game throws us any kind of health like pickups or those options as well. So, and there are sections like that where it's just not possible to dodge the boss itself. As far as the plus flavors are concerned, though, I love how unique just every stage and boss feels in this. There's a lot of variety to the game, and that's really enjoyable. In addition, I also just love the art style. Like playing with the mechs, the beautiful pixel art we have, the fact that like enemies have different screens for when you destroy them with your sword versus when you destroy them with your weapons themselves. Those like little touches, attention to detail, the stat screen when the game boots up. I love that kind of stuff, and that's what really drew me to Cybattler in the first place, and it's part of why I can recommend this title, especially if you're playing in a two-player. Alright, that should just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us this week, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.